Good morning, friends and enemies. Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho to all you little hoes out there. We are doing a full running back and wide receiver preview video right now, okay? We're going game by game for every game in Week 17 as it relates to fantasy football. So every relevant fantasy running back and wide receiver will be touched upon, will be talked about in this video, and we are going to be labeling them as a must start, a strong start, a dub flex, an L flex, or a cone. All right, everyone's getting bucketed into that. Figured we'd save some time. We'd save some. I have a family. I have a life. I'm a human being. I need to get home to see my mother for Christmas Eve. Okay, so I got to make this video all in one, and Tony gets to edit just one video at a time. So this is going to be a little bit of a longer one as we dive through the Week 17 slate, as we dive into the most important year of the fantasy football season. This is championship season, okay? The sit starts. This is where they matter. This is where everything culminates. All the work that we've put in since March, since January, bubbles up and pops this Sunday, starting tomorrow, because we have 2 Wednesday games on Christmas. We have the Thursday night game. We've got 3 games on Saturday. We've got Sunday slate. We've got Monday night football, okay? So we have nothing but football for the next week. So that being said, we are going to need to dive into things. Otherwise, this video is going to be 80 years long. First up on Christmas, we have the Kansas City Chiefs in Pittsburgh. The Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites, 44.5-point total here. Now, listen, a lot of this conversation, it's happening so early in the week. We have so many injuries still to come. We have so many things that we don't know at this point in the week. So a lot of what I give you is going to be a little bit of a vibe check, all right? Just how I'm feeling about things, just how I'm feeling about injuries, what I've heard, the rumors, reports, all that kind of stuff. So if I say something now that doesn't add up on Friday, I apologize. I'm going to do my best. All I could do is show up as my worst sometimes, but as my best right now for y'all. That's what we're going to do. So for KC and Pittsburgh, for all these early games, we do have some practice reports available to us early on. So we're going to go through what we know at this point. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, because they play on Wednesday, they had to do like a fake practice report on Sunday, what a player would have been or wouldn't have been, whatever. There's nothing on Monday for whatever reason that I could find anywhere, although I'm filming this on Tuesday morning, which is kind of weird, but whatever the case may be. In terms of DMPs, DJ Humphries, a DMP on Sunday. We'll see what happens on Tuesday. Chris Jones is the big one. From what I've heard, he is almost guaranteed to miss this game, which opens up the middle of the line for this defense, which is a massive deal because their run defense has been amazing, and it's always anchored by Chris Jones. So Chris Jones, very, 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 I'd say 99% chance of him missing this game. On the Pittsburgh side of things, we have George Pickens back to a full practice on Monday. He is looking like he is going to be suiting up to go. TJ Watt played last week, was kind of a shell of himself. I still don't think he's 100%, but another week, hopefully he didn't aggravate anything. He will be playing this game as well. Some of the bigger news, though, is them getting back Deshaun Elliott at safety, Dante Jackson at cornerback, Joey Porter Jr., unfortunately, unless he makes a miraculous comeback on Tuesday and gets in a limited or full practice, likely going to be out for this game, but keep an eye on that one. That's kind of a big hit, obviously, for the cornerback scenario, but they do get some D-backs back. They get George Pickens back, which is massive for the team. Now, as it relates to the actual players in the game, in KC, we have not been able to trust Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco at this point. They're kind of riding the hot hand. They don't really make explosive plays at this point. We've only seen one goal line carry or 2 goal line carries over the last month since Pacheco's return. Pacheco got one, and Kareem Hunt ended up scoring last week. So really hard to tell which of these guys we're going to be wanting to play, and they are both playing against the Pittsburgh run defense, which is really, 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 really good. So in my eyes, they are both L flexes, closer to the cone category than they are the dub flex category. For the pass catchers, we had Hollywood Brown return. He only ran about 35% of the routes, but saw over a 50% target per route run rate. I don't know that I trust him in this matchup. I don't know that he serves a full complement. I feel like if we had one extra week, if you were playing into week 18, he might be a good start for then. But I'm going to say L flex for Hollywood Brown. DeAndre Hopkins, for whatever reason, is running a handful of routes. He's not a full-time player right now, but with Joey Porter Jr. out, I will say it's an uptick in matchup. That being said, I'm probably going to throw D-Hop into the L-Flex category. I will rank him above Hollywood Brown, even though Hollywood Brown, 8 targets on 16 routes, super fucking impressive. I just don't know that on limited sample sizes or on limited routes run, we can depend on that type of volume week after week after week. And then we have Xavier Worthy, who's been really, really, really good for the last month of the season, getting a ton of targets, another huge target game last week. He's getting involved on the ground game. So, like, he is a dub flex to me at this point, and someone that I would not be scared to put into my lineup despite the matchup. On the flip side, for Pittsburgh, George Pickens, he's going to be a strong start. I do have a little bit of hesitation. He's not a must start for me, only because, one, like, the matchup's a little bit tough, but two, when you have the coaches that Casey has, they're really good at, like, limiting the thing that you do best. George Pickens also, like, I think if this wasn't such a big game, he might miss this game. I don't think he's going to be 100% on the field. He's a tough dude. He'll run it out and obviously try his fucking best and see if he could last the entire game, but I do have a little bit of hesitation on the injuries. So we're going to throw him into the strong start category. For the running backs, obviously Chris Jones being out is a massive blow to the KC run defense, and for the rest of the wide receivers for Pittsburgh, they're all cones. Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren. Over the last 2 weeks, Jaylen Warren has outplayed, outtouched, outsnapped, outreceived, out everythinged Najee Harris. Most of that was game script dependent. When they don't have George Pickens, they cannot move the ball. They end up losing by wide margins, right? And that ends up being why Jaylen Warren plays a lot more. I think Christmas Day, the cold weather, no Chris Jones. I think they go back. I still think it's going to be a hot hand situation. I still think both of the backs are going to get a bunch of touches. I don't really feel great about either of them, to be honest with you. Najee's coming off of 2 horrendous games, but I think he'll get a decent volume floor. I actually have Pittsburgh in this game. I took them on FanDuel at +3, or I might have got the hook there too, 3.5. So I think this game is going to be very close. I don't think KC runs away with this one. And if that's the game script, I think Najee is plenty involved. That being said, I don't really feel comfortable about either of them overall, so I'm actually going to put both Najee and Jaylen Warren into the L-Flex category, though I would rank Jaylen Warren over Najee. I also have a bet up for this game. I have Najee over 39.5 rushing yards. I have Samaje Perine over 9.5 receiving yards. Now, since week 2, Samaje Perine has been the running back on long down and distance snaps 95% of the time. He has been in on the 2-minute and 4-minute drills 80% of the time for the Kansas City Chiefs. All right. He has hit this receiving yardage line in like 6 straight games too. So this is the slip that I'm hitting on Underdog. I'm going to do a little giveaway. If you tail this with me, in the KC Pittsburgh game, and this slip hits, and we all hit, I'm going to give away $500 to someone, just free, all right? So if you go download the Underdog app, use code BDGE, honestly, they will deposit match you on there, so basically you're doing this slip for free. It could be as little as $10 that you put onto this slip. If you ride with me, and if we hit this slip together, I'm going to choose somebody that rode with me, give them $500, Christmas paid for, how you doing? Najee Harris, higher than 39.5 rushing yards. Samaje Perine, higher than 9.5 receiving yards. Let's move on to Christmas Day game number 2. We have Baltimore -5.5 in Houston, 46.5 point total. Let's bring up the practice reports. For Houston, we have back-to-back DMPs for Shaq Mason and Juice Scruggs. These are the 2 starting offensive linemen that are going to ruin this offensive line. So that has been a huge problem for the Houston Texans. Getting pushed for the run game, especially on 1st and 2nd downs. CJ Stroud is under pressure all the time, especially on 3rd downs. When they go into 3rd downs and it's like 3rd and 8 and the defense can pin their ears back and just rush CJ Stroud, when they're banged up on the offensive line, it's going to be problematic for this team. For Baltimore, we have the estimation on Sunday. We have a practice on Monday. The concerning piece here is Zay Flowers. We have back-to-back DMPs with a shoulder injury. Justice Hill is going to miss this game. Doesn't really affect anything. Zay Flowers, back-to-back DMPs. We need him to get back to a limited practice at least today. So you will know later today what happens with that, but that is something we need to be keeping our eye on. So with that said, Baltimore, obviously Derrick Henry is a must-start. Do we see a Derrick Henry versus Houston? Remember the Derrick Henry December Houston games we used to get when he was a Tennessee Titan? Do we see a vintage Derrick Henry? He's a must-start for you, of course. Zay Flowers, he's going to be a dub flex, I think, if he ends up playing. If he does not, things open up for the rest of the pass catchers. There's no one you could really trust here besides probably Rashad Bateman. I think Bateman would move into a dub flex category for me. I'm not overly excited, but I think he's super usable. He's played really well this year. He's connecting with Lamar on long passes, on touchdowns. Like, they're taking shots to him down the field. So really like that for Rashad Bateman if Zay Flowers were to miss. Also think it's a nice little boost for Isaiah Likely here. On the flip side, Houston, Tank Dell obviously out for quite a while now, probably into like 2025. 2025, 2026-ish season. Nico Collins is a must start. There's no receiver behind him that I'm overly excited about. On the flip side, Joe Mixon has been pretty bad over the last month of the season. This run game can't get shit going. They get no push. The offensive linemen are hurt now. Baltimore's run defense and their pass defense has been really good. That is the other thing I want to say quickly. It doesn't really affect anybody in this game because you're starting Nico Collins regardless, and you're probably not starting any Houston receiver anyways. But Baltimore, over the last 5 weeks of the season, Baltimore is the #1 defense in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. They have just absolutely gone rock hard on some motherfuckers out here, all right? So Joe Mixon, he's a dude where he struggled. Their offensive line is banged up. Baltimore's run defense is very good. You're not going to sit Joe Mixon, but if you have a extremely stacked lineup, I'm going to throw him into the strong start category, and I don't feel great about it. He's probably in like the RB 18 to 20 range there. There's a possibility you have 2 top 15 running backs, and then you just move on to flex and have better options there. So I don't feel great about it, but matchup is bad. O-line is bad. A lot of players banged up in that one. So that's the Christmas slate. Let's move on to Thursday Night Football. We've got Seattle. We've got Chicago, and we have a 43.5 point total in this one. Seattle, 3.5 point favorites here. We do have a few practice reports for Seattle. Really hard to read. The only thing you need to know is that Kenneth Walker is going to miss this game. He injured his ankle after coming in with an injured calf. So Kenneth Walker is going to miss this game. For Chicago, what you need to know is Braxton Jones is going to be out for this game. He's on the IR, but Tevin Jenkins also DNP on Monday. If he does not return, now you are looking at a similar, problem to Houston. Chicago is going to be down multiple offensive line, which is already not a strong point of their team. Caleb Williams lives under pressure. He extends plays for too long. Like, that's going to be a huge issue for them, as Seattle's defense has kind of been getting better as the weeks have progressed, and they're getting some real push on the defensive line there. So with Seattle likely out Kenneth Walker, Kenny McIntosh played a role. Zach Charbonnet didn't really play at all last week. I think it was way more injury related. He'll have another week of rest, even though it's a short week. So, listen, if Kenneth Walker's out, on paper, Zach Charbonnet should be a must start. We've seen what he does in games. We've seen the ceiling that he has, right? And you don't want to sit that. Chicago's run defense is trash. I do have a little bit of a concern that Zach Charbonnet, the dude didn't play at all last week. They had rather given, I don't know how to fucking say this sentence correctly. They would just rather give touches to Kenny fucking McIntosh than the dude Charbonnet, who just went for a $150 and 2 touchdowns a couple weeks ago. That if that doesn't just scream to you that he's clearly fucking less than 100%, way less than 100%, then there's something wrong with you, okay? So with Charbonnet, listen, with K-Dubs out, I'm going to start Charbonnet, but I'm just saying, player props, DFS stuff, I'd stay away from him because the injury is obviously real here, and it might hamper him a little bit in this game. But you're likely starting Charbonnet. As it relates to the receivers, we saw a DK Metcalf bounce back, but we're still seeing JSN as a much more involved receiver. Chicago's pass defense has been had over the last month of the season since they've turned things around and shifted the coaching staff and everything. They're not the same scary defense that they were in the beginning of the year. So I think ultimately JSN is going to be a very strong start, as he has been for a minute. And DK Metcalf will be a dub flex because, we could see him pop off for a big touchdown like we saw last week, any given play. So he's a dub flex, but probably at the bottom of the tier, to be honest with you. I don't think we could just forgive everything over the last month of the season. It wasn't an overly strong game last week outside of the touchdown either. So if he doesn't get that, then we're looking at another flop game here. For Chicago, we have DeAndre Swift. Seattle's run defense is a lot more susceptible to fantasy points than their pass defense at the moment. But DeAndre Swift, like Joe Mixon, has been bad. Like Joe Mixon, will be without an offensive line. Roschon Johnson did return. So Swift here, to me, he's going to end up being an L flex. I don't feel good about having him in my lineup. He was like the RB 40 the first 3 weeks of the season, had that good stretch where he was kind of great. And then the last month of the season, he's been back to, RB 40 mode here. And I don't know if I can depend on him in the finals of my fantasy lineup. So I'm kind of out on DeAndre Swift. Keenan Allen's been fucking incredible. So he's going to be a strong start, if not a must start at this point. I don't see a lineup where I would not have him in. Rome Odunze's been super lackluster, making a lot of mistakes, has some good games, but you can't trust him. So he'll be an L flex for me. DJ Moore is getting a lot of, just produced volume for himself, a lot of screen passes. Sometimes they take deep shots down the field to him. I think he's a fine play, so he'd be a dub flex for me. Moving on to the Saturday slate. We have got 3 games, and this is where practice reports just go out the fucking window. We are just estimating everything at this point. Saturday kicks off with the Chargers in New England. The Chargers 4.5-point favorites, 43.5-point total here. Gus Edwards coming off the big game. It's a possibility that J.K. Dobbins gets activated and plays in this game. Now, New England, in terms of just fantasy points allowed to running backs, they have been torched recently, and I think this is a game where if Dobbins doesn't play, I feel okay about Gus Edwards. I feel okay. I'm going to put him into the dub flex category. If Dobbins does play, it makes everything extremely messy because I don't see Dobbins coming back to a full workload there. So to be honest with you, I think that puts everybody into the L flex category. If Dobbins is active, Kamani Vidal will be a cone. For the receivers, we are looking at Ladd McConkey and nobody else there. Ladd McConkey would be a dub flex strong start for me. Tony, you could, however you feel about him, Tony, you put him into that category, all right? On the flip side, for New England, we have Ramondre Stevenson, who got volume, got an end zone, got into the end zone last week, but then dropped a backward pass, which ended up being like a fumble and kind of cost them the game. And then it turned into all Antonio Gibson. So is Ramondre in the doghouse right now? Kind of. Last time he got put in the doghouse, though, he ended up coming out like not playing the first 3 snaps and then going 20 for 92 touchdowns or whatever. So like we've seen this before. I also don't think the pass was really his fault. So, you know, they put him in the doghouse at the end of the game. I don't know if that's how we're going to start this next upcoming game, though the Chargers defense, you know, is a good defense overall. So when I think about New England, the ground game, I'm going to say Ramondre's in the dub flex category. Don't feel great about him. He's at the lower tier of that bucket there. Gibson's going to be in the L flex category for me. He is catching a ton of passes and he is relatively involved. And in the off chance that, you know, Ramondre is in the doghouse, then Gibson becomes super playable. For the receivers, yeah, nobody's getting into my lineup for New England. Moving down the Saturday slate, we've got Denver at Cincinnati. Cincy 3-point favorites here, 49.5-point total. Cincy just scrapping for their lives right now to get into the playoffs. They're still playing for something. Nothing crazy on that side of the ball. Obviously, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown are all straight up into the must-start category. On the flip side, we've got Denver, Bo Nix. Now, what's really going to come down to like what we're doing in this backfield here, we saw Estimate come out, get some carries, get a touchdown. Sean Payton has some praise for him afterwards, saying he's going to get more involved going forward. I think like the success of the running backs last week, Javonte Williams caught like 8 passes, really came down to the fact that Jaleel McLaughlin was inactive. When they have 3 guys going, you have no fucking idea what you're going to get. When they have 2 guys going, like overall, they combine to have a lot of fantasy production and success in that backfield if you just look at combined statistics. When you divide it by 3, the pie is too messy. When you divide it by 2, it ends up being 2 decent pieces of pie there, two bites that I feel good about taking. So really comes down to Jaleel McLaughlin. If he plays, I'm not starting anybody in that backfield. I don't care that Cincinnati's like the worst defense in the NFL. They're just not a team. I'm just not depending on a 3-headed, hot hand committee there. If he doesn't play, I think both Estime and Javonte will be flexible players, flex-worthy players, but still in the L flex category for me. Receivers, Cortland Sutton's just going to be a strong start, and I'm probably not looking at anybody else in that passing game. The last game of the Saturday slate, we've got Arizona, who was knocked out of the playoffs in LA in the Dome against the Rams. The Rams, 5.5-point favorites, 48.5-point total. This is going to be a nice bounce back game for, I think, all parties involved here. The Rams obviously coming off of back-to-back bad passing days for Stafford. Cooper Kupp is throwing up fucking donuts like he works at Popeyes. That ain't even the right store, like he works at Krispy Kreme. I'm just moving a mile a minute right now, thinking about numbers, thinking about games, thinking about spreads, thinking about fucking players, everything, injuries out here. So Popeyes, Krispy Kreme, fuck it, we getting donuts somewhere. The Rams. Okay, so Cooper Kupp's going to have to be, I guess, in the dub flex category. Maybe he is just losing some steam right now. I think it's more tied to the offense and, maybe bad weather or game plan. Kyron Williams getting 28,000 carries. I think Cooper Kupp's fine. He's going to be in one of my lineups this week in the championship game. So he's a dub flex. Puka's a must start. Kyron's a must start. For Arizona, things get a little tricky here, obviously. Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know how you trust him at this point. The dude puts up like 40 yards a game pretty much. You have to think that they're going to start looking elsewhere or just putting targets to other players and stop forcing things his way. I think you could play him, but he's definitely in the L flex category for me. I don't feel good about having him in my lineup by any stretch of the fucking imagination. The backfield is where things get tricky here, okay? Because we have James Conner, who left the game with a knee injury. From what I heard, it's not an overly concerning injury, but the fact that they are eliminated from the playoffs and they're not playing for anything probably puts it at a higher likelihood that he does not play. I still think there's a chance that he does play. He's a tough dude. He wants to be out there. There are incentives that players are playing for. I don't know if Connor has any of them right now, but I'm just saying, these guys want to play. They want to rack up stats. They want to fucking play football. It's what they do for work, and it's what they love. And James Conner feels like a dude that loves playing fucking football. So if he can play, he's going to suit up. And if he suits up, I'm not overthinking it. He's going into my lineup. If he doesn't, then we have to figure out what the fuck is going on behind him. Amari DiMarcano, he's on the IR. Trey Benson did not play last week. He is dealing with what I think is like a medium to high ankle sprain. I would be kind of surprised if he played this week. He was DMP all last week. Didn't even get a limited practice in. We'll have to watch for practice reports this week to get a better eye on it. If he plays, I would probably play him over Trey Benson, but I don't know that I feel great about either dude if Trey Benson goes. I think unless he gets like limited, then full practice, then I won't feel good about him. But if he comes back and we see at least 2 full practices out of Trey Benson, I'll throw him into the dub flex category. Otherwise, I'm probably staying away from this backfield overall. If he doesn't play, Michael Carter is going to be in line for a pretty big game. They also have like DJ Dallas, who I will get some snaps. Like Michael Carter's not built to take on the workload that James Conner's built to take on, but Michael Carter's a really good pass catching back. He was really good on the ground at UNC, pretty good for the New York Jets as well. Just probably not a dude you want to give 25 touches to, but I still think he has a nice floor in PPR. So if James Conner's out, I'm actually going to throw Michael Carter into the dub flex category. I think you could do a lot worse. And we can finally move on to the Sunday games. We have Dallas in Philly. Philly, 9.5-point favorites. Is that still on the board? That feels crazy given Hurts' status. Yeah, I just checked DK in Philly. They're 9-point favorites. They're at home, 43.5-point total, despite not having any clue whether or not Jalen Hurts is going to play, right? Like, obviously, he is dealing with the concussion, so 50-50 chance for him to be back. On that side of the ball, like, you're starting A.J. Brown regardless of who's under center. You're starting Saquon Barkley regardless who's under center. Devontae Smith gets a little bit more dicey here, in my opinion. Trayvon Diggs is on the IR, so he's out for Dallas. They have a lot of banged-up players at this point. If Kenny Pickett's playing, I'm going to be honest, I don't feel great about Devonta Smith. I know the target tree was very, very condensed, but it does feel like they're just going to go unbelievably ground-heavy. Ask Kenny Pickett to throw the ball 20 times. A.J. Brown gets half of those targets. I don't think it'll be a game where no tight end or no other wide receiver gets targets either. I feel a lot less good about Devontae Smith. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit hesitant to start him in my lineup. Kenny Pickett, championship week. Like, I don't feel great about that. I'm going to throw him into the L-Flex category. It hurts to say that, but I think that's how we're going to round out the Philadelphia Eagles. No one else is in your lineup. For Dallas, we have Rico Dowdle, who really struggled against Tampa Bay. Again, similar to Baltimore, Tampa Bay has been great over the last 5 weeks of the season. Number 1 against fantasy running backs. Points per game, Tampa Bay's defense turned it around. 8 Rico Dowdle up. Philly's defense, incredible as well. I think he's going to have a tough time running against them. I still think like the volume's going to be there. He's still going to be the pass catcher. He's played really well over the last month of the season. So Rico's still going to be a dub flex for me, despite the outlook not being great. CeeDee Lamb's obviously in your lineup if he is playing. Jalen Tolbert hurt his thumb. If like Tolbert and CeeDee Lamb are both out, because CeeDee Lamb kind of banged up his shoulder again, re-injured the shoulder again. I think he's going to end up playing through it regardless. But if both of them are out, I think Brandon Cooks is like an L flex. I think Jake Ferguson should probably be in your lineup. Moving down to Indy and the New York Football Giants. Indy, 7.5-point favorites on the road in New York, 40.5-point total. Do not expect a lot of points here. JT coming off of the monstrous 200-yard game, so he's obviously a must-start. With A-Rich, again, I don't think this is going to be a game where they're going to ask him to throw the ball a lot. He had 11 pass attempts last week. Josh Downs had a good game. I think Josh Downs is I would probably put every pass catcher for Indy straight into the cone category. Downs, he's had more good games than he has bad with Anthony Richardson. But like everything about this game feels like a slot fest, low scoring, don't need to do much type of game. So Downs for me, the matchup is good. So he's like on the borderline of dub flex and L flex for me, where you could definitely do worse, but I don't feel great because I could see a lot of paths to where, A-Rich just throws for 125 yards and, Downs might get 6 targets, but not turn it into much. On the flip side, you got New York, Tyrone Tracy coming off of a good game. Indy, they've been okay against the run. Tracy has kind of regained the backfield over Devin Singletary. You don't really know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. The matchup is a lot better, though, so I'm going to put Tracy into the dub flex category. Gets a lot of volume, catches a lot of passes, gets a ton of targets. With Malik Neighbors, He does the same thing every week. I don't need to tell. Like, I could literally tell you how many fantasy points he's going to have. He's going to have 14.7 PPR fantasy points. Do with that what you want. Nobody else is in my lineup. Next up, we've got probably the fucking woke game of the week. We got Vegas. We got New Orleans. New Orleans, 1.5 point favorite at home, 39.5 point total. We just saw the Saints get fucking blanked by the Green Bay Packers. That felt like super obvious to see coming. The Saints, there's nothing really here to discuss other than maybe Kendre Miller. Like, Kendre had a horrible game, but again, that was kind of predictable. Like, you knew the Saints were going to get their asses kicked. You knew he's not the pass-catching back. He's not in line to be a dude who, is staying in on 2-minute drills, is staying in and passing down situations. If they can get the ground game going, which they've been able to do before, prior to last night. They're an indoor dome team playing in Green Bay, in Lambeau, freezing cold field, terrible game script. Better days ahead for Kendre, but from what we saw, obviously it doesn't feel good putting him here, but I think he's playable. I think he's flexible. I'll put him into the L flex category. Much better matchup against the Raiders here, but you still don't feel comfortable because of what we saw last night. For the Raiders, this is also a great matchup. If you look at New Orleans and what they've allowed to running backs, what they've allowed to wide receivers, 25th in coverage rank per PFF, 25th in fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver in the good way. Their run defense rank is 31st in the NFL, 5th most fantasy points per game allowed to the running back position. So, for Vegas, I think there are startable pieces here. Obviously, Brock's in your lineup. Jacoby Myers, I know he had a bad game last week, but as long as Aiden O'Connell's under center, he has more good games than he has bad games. Jacoby's going to be a dub flex for me. The backfield gets a little tricky. Like, Alexander Mattison and Amir Abdullah both kind of got home last week. They're both used pretty much at a split, in pass catching, in rushing, in just overall workload in this backfield. So I don't feel overly great about either of them, but the matchup is kind of fantastic. I would give a slight edge to, I'm going to put them both in the L flex category. Like, I don't want to be starting either of these guys in my fucking fantasy football championship. They're going to be flex worthy plays. L flex, I would rank Madison over Amir Abdullah. And if I was ranking all three running backs in this game, because that might be a decision y'all have to make, I think I would give the lean. I think I would go Alexander Mattison, Kendre, Amir Abdullah in that order there. Moving down, we got the Jets at Buffalo. Buffalo, 9.5 point favorites at home, 46.5 point total here. James Cook in your lineup. I don't think any wide receiver outside of Khalil Shakir can touch your lineup. Like, one or two of them might have good weeks, but good fucking luck predicting who that's going to be in your fantasy championship. So James Cook must start. Khalil Shakir, I'll throw him into the dub flex category. Way more good games than bad games, despite having a bad game last week. For the Jets, we have Breece Hall completely taking back over the backfield there. So he's going to be I'm not going to say a strong start for me necessarily. I'm going to throw him into the dub flex category just because he doesn't score touchdowns. The offense is completely now run through Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. So, his upside has kind of been capped, but he's still someone that I could be okay with having in my backfield. Playing catch up, he might have a nice PPR floor here. Devontae Adams, at this point, I kind of feel like he needs to be in the must-start realm because him and Aaron Rodgers are just stuck together like glue. Garrett Wilson's going to be a dub flex for me. Moving on to Tennessee and Jacksonville. Jacksonville, 1.5 point favorites, 40.5 point total here. Jacksonville, I mean, you have the two running backs, hot hand approach, can never guess who's going to have the better game. I will say game script is kind of working in favor of Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby is also coming off of the better game. So I'm going to say both of them are L flexes, but I would rank Tank Bigsby above Travis Etienne here. Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be in my lineup. He is a very strong start. And then nobody else on the Jacksonville side of things for wide receivers. For Tennessee, we have confusing backfield right now. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears getting the better of him the last couple of weeks, but most of that was garbage time. I don't know how the goal line carries are going to be split up when they're actually in a normal game script like they will be against Jacksonville. We have to keep an eye on Tony Pollard. Obviously, if Tony Pollard's out, Tajay Spears is a must-start play. If Tony Pollard plays, great matchup. Very hard to predict who's going to get what, who's going to be in on what situations, but I think the matchup is so good that I'd actually put both of them as dub flexes, Pollard and Spears, but at the very bottom of the tier. So all the dub flexes I've kind of named up to this point, they would probably be started for me over both of those running backs. Pass catchers, Calvin Ridley, he's going to be a strong start for me, given the matchup, given what he did last week, and he's someone that I've just kind of continuously been high on. NWI will be an L flex for me. Moving down, we got 5 more games still. All right, we got Carolina, Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, 7.5 point favorites at home, 49.5 point total. This game's kind kind of going to be fucking dynamite with the way Bryce Young is playing and the way both passing defenses are not playing, quite frankly. So you got Baker. You have Mike Evans, must start. Jalen McMillan has easily earned a very high dub flex category ranking for me. Sterling Shepard's going to be out with a hamstring injury. In the backfield, you have Rashad White. You have Bucky Irving. Bucky's going to be a must start for me. Rashad White's going to be in the dub flex category. Rashad White's he can be in on any goal line carry on any given week, so he has a little bit of touchdown equity on the ground. He's obviously really involved in the passing game. I do think there's a world, though, that Bucky ends up taking over the workhorse role down the stretch here. So that's kind of what's separating Rashad White from being in the strong start category. Really solid PPR floor, like he's playing in most passing situations, but he's not really getting carries anymore. Bucky has kind of completely taken over that role. And with him fumbling at the end of the game last week, I think there's a world where Bucky starts playing in the more high leverage situations there. Carolina, Chuba Hubbard. Must start, of course. Adam Thielen's a strong start for me. Great matchup. Has just looked great and played great week over week. Xavier Legette is still week to week. Possible he suits up. If he ends up suiting up, I am probably staying away from every other pass catcher not named Adam Thielen here. If he does not, listen, I might go back to Jalen Coker again as an L flex here. I know I pushed him a little bit last week. I still think the process was right. He had like 3 end zone targets. He had a 1-foot grab in the end zone where he missed a touchdown by like this much. He could have had a much better day. The way Bryce Young is playing, I think you just like roll with the process there. So Coker is going to be an L flex as long as Xavier Legette does not play. Moving down to Miami and Cleveland. Miami is in Cleveland. This weather is not supposed to be great here, which is obviously not great for Miami and Tua. 6.5 point favorites here, 40.5 point total. DTR is a little bit banged up, so we don't actually know who's going to be starting for the Browns at QB yet. So we'll have to, keep an eye on that. If DTR does end up playing, Njoku did hurt himself a little bit, so like maybe the targets are a little bit more condensed. But in similar vein, where I had Jerry Jeudy last week, he's not going to be in my lineups. Right? Everyone in the passing offense is just coned up when DTR is under center. When you look at the backfield, Miami is a tougher matchup for a dude like Jerome Ford than they had last week, although Jerome Ford looked really good. And I think you could throw him. He gets the workhorse touches. You have Deonta Foreman fumbling last week at a really crucial time, which I think just makes Jerome Ford bell cow upside very, very relevant now. So not a good matchup. Don't love the offense still, but I still think Jerome Ford is a rock solid dub flex in this matchup. When you look at the pass catchers for Cleveland, again, I think they're all cones. If Jameis Winston ends up playing, Jerry Jeudy shoots up to a strong start. Elijah Moore, I think, is probably more in the L flex category, but we'll have to kind of keep an eye on the practice reports there. For Miami, Devon Achane is a must start. Nobody else. With Tyreek Hill, he's a strong start. He's come on, scoring some touchdowns recently. That's really all about it. They can't connect on the deep passes, and I want to say eventually it's going to happen, but I don't know that is the case. Next up, Green Bay, Minnesota. This should be a fun game. They're in Minnesota. Minnesota 1.5 point favorite, 48.5 point total. In this one, you're obviously starting Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison is he's going to be a strong start for me. Aaron Jones, they're just not scoring rushing touchdowns. Like they score from through the air from Sam Darnold's arm just so fucking often. And Green Bay's defense has been a lot better. They've like really turned things around defensively. As you could see all the red and orange there. Coverage grade per PFF is top 5. EPA per pass rank, number 2. Fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position, number 2 in the NFL. Their run game, EPA per rush rank is top 10. So they're like a pretty solid defense overall. Minnesota's obviously been a really good defense all year as well. So when I look at Aaron Jones, he's a dub flex for me that, any week he could just end up getting a goal line carry and get into the end zone and have a nice like 70 to 80 yard day with a touchdown. They're going to obviously have to utilize him to beat him. A little bit of a revenge narrative here. So I want Aaron Jones in my lineup, but I don't feel like I need to push the agenda of him starting over other like really high quality players if your lineup is kind of flawless. For Green Bay, we got Josh Jacobs as a must-start, of course. Dude's a fucking revelation at this point. If you're concerned about the injury, don't. Said he could have gone back in, planned to rest him a little tonight if possible, and that was the case. Christian Watson ended up hurting his knee, and I think there's a good chance that he ends up missing this upcoming game based on the way that people are kind of talking about him on Twitter. Jaden Reed had a good game. Romeo Doubs is running a lot of routes. Dontavian Wicks is whatever Dontavian Wicks is at this point. Could be a little bit of a high-flying game, though. Obviously, 48.5 point total. They're in Minnesota, so they're in the dome there. If Christian Watson misses, Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed, I think they're going to have to score a lot of points, so I'm going to put both of them into the dub flex category. Dontavian Wicks, I don't think you can ever rely on him there. Sunday Night Football. This game's going to be fucking electric. We got the two best rookie quarterbacks over the last 10 years. Michael Penix and Jaden Daniels playing against each other. Atlanta in Washington. Washington, 4.5-point faves. 47.5-point total here for Washington. Good matchup against Atlanta. Soft pass defense. Terry McLaurin, of course, is in your lineup. In the backfield, we have Brian Robinson coming off of back-to-back stinkers. A double fumble lost game last week. I don't know how you could trust him. Atlanta's run defense has been really good over the last month. I would be okay. He's another one where I'm like on the border of dub flex and L flex. I don't want to get too cute, but I also feel like Brian Robinson has been so good all year. They're not just going to go away from him in favor of Christopher Rodriguez or fucking Jeremy McNichols. B-Rob, I think, still ends up in the dub flex category for me, but at the bottom of that tier as well. For Atlanta, big injury news on Drake London or not, right? Like Bijan's a must start, obviously, with Michael Penix and the poise that he showed and just the ability to get the ball to his receivers. We feel confident in the fantasy wide receivers here. Drake London's dealing with a little bit of a hamstring tweak. He said if they were playing for anything last week, he could have came back in and played. A lot of players, a lot of wide receivers talk about their hamstrings as if they're not a big deal, and then they miss like a month of the fucking season. Yes, I'm looking at you, Cone T. Higgins. So with him, we'll have to wait for practice reports. If he plays, I think both London and Darnell Mooney, I'll go London as a strong start. I'll go Mooney as a dub flex, although it's very hard to predict which one of them is going to have the big week. I like London a little bit better, although Mooney's played some really solid ball. If London is out, I think Mooney moves into the strong start category. I think Ray-Ray McCloud becomes playable. I'm still going to put him into the L flex category, but very, very playable. Kyle Pitts needs to literally be cut from our roster tomorrow, please. Marshawn Lattimore will be out for this game as well. He tweaked something last week, and he's not going to play. Then we have the last game of the week and the very last matchup preview of the year from yours truly. So if these videos have helped you out, if you've rocked with us all season, just hit the button that looks like this down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you are a Dynasty player, we have the Dynasty only channel as well. If you just search BDGE Dynasty Fantasy, you'll find it over there. We will start ramping up content on the Dynasty channel and pretty much exclusively do content over there starting, maybe January, February-ish. So if you're new to Dynasty or want to get into Dynasty, that would be the place to go. Look for some more content, look for some leagues that we'll be setting up for you guys. Detroit is in San Fran. Detroit 3.5-point favorites here. 50.5-point total. So they're expecting a lot of points. I think it's actually moved up to 51 at this point. For Detroit, you're obviously starting Jahmyr Gibbs, must start. For the receivers, Amon-Ra must start. Jameson Williams, I think, is a strong start. With San Francisco, things are a little bit trickier here. Huge bounce back game from Debo. And I think a lot of that was just like getting him going and getting him momentum because all their running backs were out. So like you had to use him to carry the ball. He started getting going on the ground. Detroit's got a ton of injuries to their defense, of course. So Debo, there's a league that I'm probably going to start him again. I started him last week. That wasn't sharp. I just obviously got super fucking lucky. He did really well. I'm going to probably start him again this week, and I feel okay about it. So he's going to be a dub flex for me. The other receivers, Jawan Jennings, he has not really performed great. He has a decent floor, so I'm going to put him into the dub flex category for me. Like I'd feel a lot worse about a lot of other players. So like I don't feel bad about having Jawan Jennings. So both of them are going to be in the dub flex category for me. I think I might even go Debo over Jawan Jennings just based off of last week and getting him more involved in the ground game. Isaac Guerendo could play this week. If he does suit up, I feel kind of shitty about the whole backfield. Guerendo would end up being a dub flex for me. Everybody else fades into irrelevance. Patrick Taylor, if Guerendo does not play, is the guy in the backfield, but not really. Like he had 8 carries, Debo had 5, so I'd imagine that split is like kind of similar still. And it's not anything where Taylor's in like the workhorse mode. He'll play a lot of snaps in the backfield, but I still don't think he's going to get enough work or have enough success or be efficient enough to warrant anything other than the L flex label for this game. And that is the last game. That is the last player. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that double cheeked you up for your matchups. And again, we have one beautiful slip for tomorrow's games. All right. If you tail this with me, if you ride this with me on Underdog Fantasy, I'm going to, and we hit, of course. I got to get my money first before I give it to y'all. I'm giving away $500 to someone random that rides this with me when we hit this bish. All right. That's all I got for y'all today. The next video will be Saturday, which is the private live stream Q&A. For those of y'all that are Big Dog members, BDGE.co will be the last one of the season. Good luck. Enjoy Christmas. Give your mother a smoochie for me. And I'll see you when I see you.